So, before we get into your political solution,
Mm.
which we'll talk about, you describe yourself as a radical progressive, right? So, what is the credible left wing solution to the problem of runaway inequality that you talk about? If it's not socialism, if it's not communism of the type that Francis was talking about.
Well, I think the American founders had a lot of it right. And the fact that we are now running into the contradictions that emerged in that constitutional context doesn't invalidate the correctness of the values that they spelled out and the basics of the mechanism. In other words, in the US and in other parts of the world as well, the key issue is one of the corruption of a democratic structure. So our republic now functions predatorily with respect to the population. Policy is either it is indifferent to the well-being of people, and what that generally means is that where the interests of large corporations, for example, diverge from the interests of the population, which isn't always, but when they diverge, the corporations always win. And so that has, given people the sense that the nature of governance is inherently malignant. So they have stopped participating in it in large numbers. But if you were to remove the corrupting elements, the things that have handed power all to one side, then actually democracy is not a bad way to deal with this issue, that people, to the extent that they can understand what their interests are, will tend to support them. And it is the corruption that makes that dysfunctional. That said, we do need to upgrade our structure. We need to upgrade it because the people who wrote our founding documents didn't know anything about evolutionary dynamics. They didn't know about game theory. They'd never seen a chainsaw or a train, or they couldn't have conceived of a nuclear reactor or of a process that could alter the chemistry of the atmosphere enough to change how much energy we trap from the sun. So the structure has to be updated for modern realities, and that is absolutely doable, but not until you get the corruption out of the way.
And because of this corruption that you're talking about, I presume is what is crony capitalism, essentially, whereby it's people, corruption between lobbyists and government, and essentially people's best interests not being represented, which makes people disengaged from the system.
Well, we can focus on the details, and there are a dozen mechanisms through which the water gets through the cracks. But the larger issue is, if you don't understand how evolution works, and then you don't understand, therefore, that when you're setting up a system, you're really setting up an ecosystem in which corruption will evolve, right? No matter what system you set up, to the extent that there's some loophole that allows some entity to get in to shift policy in its direction in order to enrich and empower itself, that loophole will be enlarged, and ultimately it will be the system. And that's where we are. It's happened. And what it really takes is a systems kind of thinking that will allow us to frustrate the very process that causes corruption to evolve and spread and discover new opportunities.